All right, let's get into this. This is an absolutely incredible story about a cyber heist that almost, and I mean almost, brought the entire internet to its knees. And no, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. This was a real, meticulously planned operation that unfolded over years and came dangerously close to pulling it off. You know, this wasn't some hypothetical, maybe this could happen thread. Security experts are clear. We were right on the brink of a digital catastrophe. Imagine a single key that could unlock government servers, banks, hospitals, pretty much everything. Spying, ransomware, even taking down entire countries, all of it would have been on the table.
So to really get how close we came, we have to rewind the clock a bit. The story of the internet's biggest vulnerability doesn't start with some supercomputer in a secret lab. It actually starts with something way, way more boring: a jammed printer.
Yeah, it's pretty ironic when you think about it. The whole philosophy that made the internet so powerful and so flexible is the very same thing that created its biggest weakness. And it all kicked off because one researcher got really, really annoyed. So back in the 70s, this guy, Richard Stallman, just wanted to tweak his lab's printer so it would tell him when it was jammed. Simple, right? But Xerox wouldn't share the source code. And that one little thing, that act of secrecy, it sparked a whole revolution. Stallman had this vision of a world where code was shared freely, which led him to start the GNU project. And just as that project was getting close to done, some student over in Finland, a guy named Linus Torvalds, released his own key piece of the puzzle, the Linux kernel. You put those two together, and boom, you've got the backbone of the entire open source world we live in today. These four freedoms completely flipped the script on how software was made. Instead of companies hoarding their code, developers could now work together, out in the open, building on what others had already done. It's why, right now, every single one of the world's top 500 supercomputers runs on Linux. It's why the phone in your pocket probably runs on it, and it's why most of the internet itself works. And here's the core belief when it comes to security in the open source world. The idea is that if you have enough people looking at the code, any flaw, whether it's an accident or put there on purpose, is going to get spotted pretty quickly. The whole system is basically built on total transparency and trust in the community. Okay, but here's the catch. Here's the really crucial point. What happens when one of those super important volunteers, someone who's maintaining a critical piece of the internet's plumbing in their spare time for free, what happens when they just get completely burned out? Now we get to the heist. Let's look at how that exact vulnerability was exploited in this multi-year plot to take over the internet. And this wasn't some clumsy smash and grab job. No, this was a long, patient game of psychological manipulation and some serious technical genius. This is Lasse Collin. For the better part of 2 decades, he was the only person maintaining a vital piece of software called XZ, and he was doing it for free. He was getting hammered by the community to fix bugs and add new features, all while he was struggling with his own mental health. Without even knowing it, the community was basically setting the stage perfectly for an attacker to walk right in. And then, right on cue, this new contributor shows up, calls themselves Jiatan. They were super helpful, always responsive, a really good coder. And over 2 years, Jiatan slowly, patiently earned Lasse's trust. So much so that Lasse eventually handed over control of the whole project. He could finally get a break. The problem was, Jiatan wasn't real. So check out Jiatan's strategy here. It's really brilliant in a terrifying way. He knew that attacking SSH directly, that's the tool sysadmins use to securely log into servers, was basically impossible. It's one of the most battle-tested, heavily scrutinized projects on the planet. So he went after a dependency instead, a smaller tool that SSH just happened to rely on. He didn't charge the front gate of the fortress, he found a weakly guarded side door. The attack itself was just a masterclass in deception. The malicious code was hidden inside these binary test files that, to anyone looking, just seemed like garbled data. Then, using a bunch of obscure but totally legitimate system tools, the code was designed to wake up at the perfect moment, not too early, not too late, to hijack the login process. And then it would just vanish, operating like a ghost and wiping its own footprints. And this is what made the trap so genius. See, for 99.9% of people, nothing would seem different at all. The login would work just like it always did. But if you had the attacker's special cryptographic master key, the door would just swing wide open, no questions asked. You'd have total control. And to the rest of the world, everything would look completely normal. So the attacker had this incredibly tiny window of time to make their move, what we're calling the Goldilocks zone. If they went too early, their malicious code would just get wiped clean by the system. If they waited too long, the system would lock everything down and they'd be stuck. They had to strike at the exact, precise millisecond, and they figured out exactly how to do it. So, the master plan is in motion. The backdoor is just weeks away from being installed on millions of servers worldwide. The attacker had played the long game for years, and they were right at the finish line. But then, a complete and total fluke, a tiny, almost unnoticeable glitch, blew the whole thing wide open. It all came down to this: a delay of half a second. 500 milliseconds. I mean, in the grand scheme of the internet, that's less than the blink of an eye. It's practically nothing. Well, for one developer, this tiny, almost imperceptible slowdown was just weird enough to raise a red flag. He wasn't even looking for a backdoor. He was just doing his job, but he had this nagging feeling that something just wasn't right. And what's so amazing is that the very thing that was supposed to make the backdoor invisible is what gave it away. All of that complexity, all the extra steps Jiatan took to hide the code and encrypt it and cover its tracks, well, all that work added up to a half-second delay. A delay that one very curious developer, a guy named Andrés' Freund, just couldn't let go of. And by pulling on that one tiny thread, he unraveled the entire plot. So the back door was stopped, the internet was saved, but the biggest mystery was still out there. Who was Jiatan? Who was actually behind what might be the most sophisticated attack on open source we have ever seen? You know, the attacker left this trail of breadcrumbs, but they all contradict each other. The name and the time zone seem to point to China, but that almost feels a little too obvious, right? Like a deliberate misdirection. But the patience, the sheer technical skill involved, this doesn't look like your typical criminal hackers. The consensus among the experts is that this was almost certainly the work of a well-funded, highly organized nation-state. But you know, beyond all the spy thriller tech stuff, this whole incident really exposed a deeply human problem. It showed us the insane amount of pressure we put on unpaid volunteers like Lasco Colin, people who maintain the absolute critical infrastructure of our digital lives, often for nothing more than the love of it. When you boil it all down, this wasn't just a failure of code. It was a failure of the entire ecosystem to support the people behind the code. We've built this glittering digital world on the shoulders of volunteers, and frankly, we haven't given them the support or the resources they desperately need. Now, some people might look at this and say, see, open source is broken. But a lot of people in the community, myself included, think it proves the exact opposite. It was only because the code was open that Andrés' Freund could even investigate in the first place. Think about it. In a closed source system, a backdoor like this could have stayed hidden forever. No one outside the company would have ever been able to find it. In the end, we got lucky. An incredibly observant engineer noticed a half-second delay, and that was that. But it leaves you with this really unsettling question about all the invisible code that our entire world runs on. What else is lurking down there, just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike?